Welcome to episode 501 of the Man That Can
501.
Projects podcast. I'm your host, Lockie Stewart, and today we're down in Sydney. We got Jeffrey Morgan on the show. How are you, brother?
I am good. It's been a long week, and it's even better to be sitting at the end of the week with yourself.
Mate, it's definitely a good way to finish. You were saying you've done 30-odd workshops or something this week.
35, I think about 35 this week. Good, nearly 5 a day this week. It's been pretty full on. Obviously, a lot around men's mental health and a lot around just helping people of a mindset, struggle, mental health and wellbeing level, and it's been powerful. It's been a powerful week.
Before we dive back into how you got there, I first heard about you through Cooper Chapman, who runs the Good Humans podcast. Your story really jumped out at me because there's a lot of people that I feel will be able to learn a lot from how you've turned your life around. But throughout the chaos of the week that you've just had, you know, engaging with a lot of people, dealing with probably a bit of resistance and stuff like that, how do you manage your own well-being and energy throughout that?
Yeah, I always put time into that space, and this is for everybody. Whether you're, if you work from a 9 to 5, obviously I've got my own business. I can travel anywhere in the world, but I'll put time into that, So I'll just block it out, and it might say 2 hours chillax in my actual weekly plan. I'll do that every Friday, and that way I know what's coming in that week. Because if I don't, the money's great, but when I was a PT before, as you know, and start at 5 a.m. and finish at 9 p.m. back-to-back sessions, fully booked out for a long, long period of time, and I just burnt out. I was running on empty the whole time, and that taught me a valuable lesson never to take into any part of my life and make sure that I balance that life out with not only some chillax time, but maybe, just walking a dog and having 2 hours. I'm not rushing around, walking a dog, talking to the missus, and, just loving life.
And how do you go about structuring that? A lot of our listeners are CEOs and people in high management positions, so they will find themselves in the position where work takes priority, and it is easy to see the bills, the money rolling in. You're like, I want more of that. I want more of that.
Absolutely.
So how do you go about? Do you use a calendar, your phone, and I guess listing out your priorities? What's that process look like for you?
Absolutely. I've got a whole bunch of stuff. Power 100 in the morning. So the Power 100 is like 100 things that you could do before you kick off your day in any way, shape or form towards your business, the business you work for. Then I have an hour of power, 12-minute blocks, 5-minute segments. And those segments are, once again, same thing around what's important to myself. Tight through my hip flexor. Let's get a stretch on. Want to read about something to head towards something I'm speaking about that week. These little segments allow you to start to be very powerful in conversation, in knowledge, foundations, layer upon layer, and that allows you to step into spaces and places where people want you to be a part of that, but most importantly, you're still managing yourself. And I think a lot of people in this day and age, as you know, it used to be 9 to 5, now it's 5 to 9. And that space on the back end and at the end of the day is geared towards, let's say, an organisation that you don't even get paid for, but you want to work your way up through those ranks. And that's the hardest thing. I think if you're going to dedicate 8 hours, I look at it now, especially obviously later on once you find out where I came from, the context was, is that worth the effort that I was putting into that space? And what if I put that same time, energy and effort into another space, i.e. my online business, the e-commerce side of things? What would happen? And it's taken off and obviously allowed us, I could live from Mykonos, and I spent those 8 hours that you're putting into another organisations, their goals, dreams, aspirations, which is cool if that's what you want to do. I'm not here to judge you, but I just want you to be conscious of, what if I put that same time into another space? Would I make more money if money's the driver for yourself, and have more freedom of time to do what I want with who I want and how I want? And that's something I became very conscious of through the life that I lived and how I got to this space.
Yeah, opportunity cost is a very important one for people to think about that they often definitely overlook. Like when you were saying that there, I'm thinking, I get clients coming through and we've scaled our academy. One, it's awesome because we get a lot of, like-minded people that I can learn a lot from. But two, from a time point of view, you're delivering results in a shorter amount of time. And I also get time to then focus on health, my relationship and things like that. But when you look at an invoice for a one-to-one client as opposed to a group program, like the one-to-one's quite juicy, isn't it? But I know that sacrificing that now and delivering more into those programs in the long term is going to trade off. And as you were saying, that opportunity cost, a lot of people don't think about that. And it
don't have the time.
Yeah, don't have the time. And I always think about it, when I was a chippy, I never had the time to do anything.
Absolutely.
And I see a lot of people who are starting families and they're now stressed about finances. They don't have the ability to, be stay-at-home dads, etc.
Absolutely.
And when I met my wife, 2018, when I was a bit of what I would call myself a degenerate, my goal then was to put myself in a position where I could be a good role model. I could
Love
work
that.
from anywhere in the world.
Love
And
that.
what's it, nearly 10 years now to put myself in that position. I've been working at that, and there's always been a cost of that, and that's been, limited drinking, limited partying, which I used to love doing,
Absolutely.
but I've invested my time in other areas to build networks and skills, etc.
And a lot of people will go down that path where they want the party life or they want the
Yep.
materialistic financial things, the clothing. But my biggest thing to everybody is, even in that space, if you spent 10 years worth of, not even, I think personally, if you give one full year towards that direction, give up the partying, even, you're in a corporate space, give up that time where you say, I'm going to dedicate it to them. Actually, I'm going to dedicate it to myself now. But with those 8 hours, don't just jump out and say, all right, I'm not aiming to be the CEO of that company. What I will do is be the CEO of my company, to give me that freedom of time to be the father or to travel to these locations I'd love to do. And it's one thing I do with my group. I say, what's your ideal life look like? One of the first things, and when they write that out, then I say, show me your weekly planner. I say, show me where all that stuff is in your weekly planner. And we do this with billion-dollar companies, your CEOs, the leadership groups, the management teams. And they look at it and they say, it's not in there. And I said, when was the last time? One group the other day, 30 different people within the group had not travelled for 5 years with their families. 5 years. So we went around the group and, financially, do you feel secure? Yep. Do you feel secure in the sense that you've got a great family that you're spending time with? What happens if you drop dead? What are you doing it for? And they said, I die for my family. I said, but would you live for your family? Because your family, do you think you'd be any good to them if you died? Even in using your analogy, the money side of things, you're the money maker for the family. You're actually going to take yourself out of that scenario, and then what happens? So it's just, you bring these light bulb moments to people, and it just means that we take 2 seconds, we prioritize our time to make sure we step into a space where we allow ourselves to be more knowledgeable around how we can really utilize that time. You've done it well, and I'd rather spend 10 years working on my own dreams, set myself up for the rest of my life to be the best of my life, than spend the rest of my life in a space chasing a particular title or label, CEO of whatever company, where I'm giving up my time and life towards them rather than the things that are actually truly important to myself.
Have you always had that outlook? Or let's go back to, so you grew up in Redfern, didn't you?
Good old Redfern, just up the
Yeah,
road.
let's go there. I was walking past and I saw the sign. I was like, we got Jeff on the Savo. He's a local. So let's go back to the younger Jeffrey. Let's start there.
12 years of age, I jump out of a window, first floor window. Father's been physically abusive. That was his way of discipline. And, a lot of what he taught me in that process taught me values for life. And I'm forever grateful. I'm very disciplined in the way that I act. And it was the things in the way, 12 years he only had with myself. In those 12 years, he really got me to a point where that's still, those habits and rituals are still well within my life. Get out on the streets, I'm doing my best to eat and sleep where I could, and, family, friends, or stuff of that nature. And when I say that, probably ran away from family because Dad was so physically abusive. I didn't want to get caught, in the sense, like I was thinking, mate, he's going to whip my butt. Stayed out, got into crime, found money one day in one of those shops, and it led to a life of crime, 25 years of crime. And by the end of that, I'd been locked up over 18 years as a bank robber. By the end of it, locked up in Melbourne, served 7 years. It was just this week, actually, was the 20th anniversary since my last.
I did see a post that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's been a journey. And as I said, if I can come out and I'm an ex-crim in people's eyes, and I'm happy, I'm cool with whatever labels. I know I have total awareness of who I am, and what somebody says about me isn't my business. I keep rolling towards what I want to do, and I've always been of that nature. And I think my old man, once again, the discipline of not worrying about what others think, focus on what you need to get done. And by the end of that, as I said, I get out 2010, going to the personal training side of thing. 216, I'm starting to burn out. I noticed it. Same thing like yourself. Like I'm out partying,
Yeah.
bendering every weekend, having great times with friends, but missing out on life. Having travelled, spent 18 years in a cell on and off, like here and there. For 7 years on the last one, 5 years before that, 3 years before. All these different sentences. And one of the promises I had made to myself was to travel as much as I could when I got out. Came out for those 6 years, making great money, bendering on the weekends, and sister commits suicide. I'm doing these, these talks about mental health, about health and well-being, even in the fitness industry, and it was littered people all through that industry, as you know.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not a knock on people. Each to their own. You do what you want to do. I'm
Yep.
not here to judge anybody, but I got to a point where I just pulled myself up on the bullshit, and like yourself, I sat there. And I was just thinking about it when I walked here. I think one person actually pulled me up. I actually lied, two people. One on the bendering, we were partying with a mate, and he said, "Morgs, I love what you do, brother. I love all your content, love it, who you are and what you're about, how you change your life. But, bro, I mean, you were sitting here doing this. It's a bit of a contradiction."
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck. So I just pushed the plate over and I said, "Mate, I wish you all the very best, brother. I'm going to cut." And he goes, "Are you joking?" I said, "Here, take this as well." And he said, "Are you joking?" I said, "Nah." He goes, "Might as well finish it." I said, "Nah, bro. This light bulb went off in my head and I was thinking, I can't truly be good with myself and sit there in front of somebody and say, hey, we should be doing X, Y, and Z for our health." And I just got out of it, and that was
just
it.
lacking integrity there, yeah.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, so I came out and I was living good. I was making better choices. But there was components of my life, integrity, boundaries, these things that were just missing. And as a man, I still don't even think I was a man when I came out at that point, because I was making these decisions, weak boy. I call them weak boy decisions.
Yep.
And then I started to take some ownership towards that, and I started to become a man. And then I went from, in my terms, a man to a warrior, where I practiced it for a long period of time, and I put the shield on, the sword was in my hand, and I was ready to go to war at that point in time. And that's a journey in itself, where you become vulnerable. And to do that, you got to dig deep within yourself. And that's probably that second conversation I'd had. A bloke I hung around, he'd seen my partner, so I was like, well, I'll get you back in this term in my head.
Yep.
I get to, end up sleeping with his partner, thinking it was all cool and dandy. And his mate, who was my mate, texted me and said, "Morgs, I had more respect for you. I didn't think you were like that.
Yep.
He called me every name under the sun." And instead of me going, "F you, come fight me," old school way, how we grew up, I just sat there and I went, all right, you know what? He's right. And those moments, I want more of those types of people around me, because it shifted me from the boy into the man. And then from the man solidifying those same habits and rituals that were really strong in being present and keeping people safe, secure, and stable in an environment to trust me more, and also have the integrity to the words that came out of my mouth, not just through words, but through actions as well, and consistent actions for a long period of time, like yourself, 10 years now. So respect to you for doing the same thing, brother. It's a journey.
Appreciate it. You touched on a few key things there that, first one being trust. Like you mentioned there, you had that mate of yours who pulled you up on it. A lot of us, our relationships are very superficial. We don't want to upset people, and vice versa. We don't like confrontation, so we don't call people's poor behaviour out. When I played footy over in France, and when I came back, I was just destroyed with drugs and alcohol and stuff like that, because I lost my sense of identity. And all the people that I was hanging around loved it, because I was, had time to party and do all this sort of stuff, and you get that recognition, and it sort of stokes your ego up when you're partying and carrying on. But I knew how I was behaving and how I was treating women and all of that sort of stuff. Just inside didn't feel good, but I didn't have anyone to call me on that. Never. Like, I remember sitting in a gutter, and I tell this all the time. One of my closest mates, we were dating sisters at the time, and we'd both been out and cheated on our partners that night, and we'd sit in the gutter going, fuck, did it again. That happened a number of times, and none of us said, what the fuck are you doing? Like, that's
absolutely
disgraceful. But then obviously as my environment changed, people, like if I hear people doing that, I'll call them out on it, because that's not the standards that you have.
Absolutely. I love that. I was in a car the other night with my partner and son, right? And he looks across, and my partner says, "Oh, I feel sorry for that bloke. He's hunched over. He's by himself." And the son turns around and says, "Yeah, he doesn't have good friends, does he?" And that's the type of conversation, as you said, I want to have. I want to be around people that I could rely on. If I think of it going to war with this, but would I go to war with Lockie?
Yep.
And then you think, no, he borrowed $20 from me, didn't even pay me back. You reckon he's going to back me up when shots are fired or something of that nature? And you got to think, bank robberies back in the day, the crew I ran with, we ran for 20 years, and I knew that if shit went down, could I trust them? Things had happened, so I could trust them in my head. I would done things for so long to know that they were staunch in that world, and that allowed me to step into a space very strong and firm. But that was the values, morals, and beliefs of that world. And when I stepped out of it, I still was crossed over between both. And as I said, you sleep with my girlfriend, well, let's pay you back. Twisted. And then same thing like yourself, the only recognition I got from people was a high five when I pulled the blondie in the club or something, and you look at it and people think it's a good life, but then you go home and you're sleeping by yourself. And, if sometimes there was times where money would just go out the window and you think, I shouted at everybody, not one person has given me a call. I'm going through a hard time myself, or, my sister commits suicide. Not one person calls, but on the weekend there's 500 people around me because I'm shouting at everybody. And and you realise that there's a difference between friends and associates. I call it, there's either two things: associates, business, or whatever it may be. Friends step into your lounge room and have dinner with yourself. And those people, when I invite them in, I've got boundaries now. If they're at a point where I'll have that pulled up conversation, and if they don't want to be a part of that respectfully, where we all sit in a space respectfully, and then I'd rather have one friend than have 100 people just leeching on, sucking the blood dry out of myself.
Do you mind if we talk about when your sister took her life, like how you dealt with that? Because suicide impacts a lot of people, and not many people talk about it until it is in your circle sort of thing. But it is a big issue. How did that hit you, and how did you sort of navigate your way through that? Did you turn to drugs and alcohol, or did you take a more positive route through that?
Brother had committed suicide 2 years before, and same thing.
Your brother had as well.
Yeah, so before this, 2 years prior. So what had happened is I was at work. I get a message, sorry about your brother, on my lunch break, and I was like, what about my brother? And they said, oh, don't you know? And I was like, don't I know what? And then he goes, oh, bro, just ring your family. And mate, I was like, what happened? What happened? So I ring the family and I said, mate, your brother's unfortunately done something to himself. And middle of the day, playing football down in Victoria and AFL, and unfortunately was no longer on this planet. So 2 years later, I think when that happened, I had my brother commit suicide. I had my partner leave me locked, like I'm not joking, just out of the blue. We cooked dinner, we had a bit of a play around, kissy-kissy, and then we walked down to the car park and she says, I can't do this anymore. And as far as I was concerned, I treated her well, but obviously in the background things had happened, and she just, for whatever reason, Italian family wanted a different path, and I wished them all the very I actually put my hand on her shoulder and said, look, if that's what you want, I wish you all the very best. She drove out of the car park and the rest was history. But the gym shut down that I was working at, all in this one time. I had 70K in my account, paid my tax, invested in the app, bought my son a car. Left myself with 1,000. Gym shuts down, she leaves, brother commits suicide, no money in the account, and it just went from hero to zero in 2 seconds. And then you look back on it, and it just, I think that I was a bit numb about it all with the brother, and because it crossed over with the breakup, the business, I was trying to scramble and get to another gym, get the clients to come to the gym. The closest one was a distance, and it was across a main road down here in Sydney, which meant the hour. It was just a hard time. And I think, I navigated it half decently. I think I was just numb whilst I was doing that, to be honest. And by the time, I was someone who always learned to be abundant of a mindset. And I said, well, I'm going to sit back, think about what I do. I did about 18 months where I had a lot of money come into my space. Not long after that, probably when I say that, probably 6 months after that, and I was able to sit back for a little bit of time. I sold something, sat back, used that money to sort of just think about what direction do you want to take in your life. But in that 6 months, man, I was waiting for this. I was borrowing money. I was minus. I was trying to scramble and get more clients again, and it was it was a tough time. And I think because I was just so busy with the business, I didn't get time to really truly sit back and say what happened with the relationship, what happened with my brother. By the time the sister rolled around and passed on, I just went, I'm going to make sure I appreciate every single breath that I take on this planet, man. And instead of being down in the dumps, I wouldn't say I celebrated. I look for the positive out of it, and just said, what can I do to actually celebrate, that not once again, not celebrate. What could I do as a positive to learn from this experience? And I said, I'm going to wake up and actually be grateful for every single breath that I get, every single time that I wake up. And that was how I sort of flipped that attitude really quickly. And once again, that came out of left field, and there was no signs for both of those and whatsoever. Went through their social medias, and the only thing I found in both was my brother had written, if life is this hard, death must be easier. So, and that was about 3 months before. That was the only thing he'd written. And my cousin had said, say that again, I'll come smash you, or something of that. And
I'd said that to him.
On the actual post, it's still on there on the comment. So if he had told me that, I would have sat with my brother and said, what's going on? Why do you feel that specific way? But, and this is for everybody, that breakup, what did I learn from it? I always say, if there's a negative, what's the lesson from it so you can grow and prosper? And each one's like a brick to the house you're building to build a solid foundation, so that you have some, your emotional intelligence, IQ, whatever you want to call it, is at a level where you're not carrying that heaviness for a long period of time, but you use that to actually put more bricks into place to appreciate what you already have, man. And the most important thing we have is life.
Oh, man, well said.
It's magic.
You were mentioning having time to think. I prioritize having time to think every day, and it sounds wanky, but it is so valuable to me to process things, have ideas, try and form my own opinions and beliefs around things. So in a day and age where your phone's always ringing or emails are coming through and people are on your case, especially people in business, right? There is limited time for thinking. How beneficial was that 6 months roughly that you got to just sit and think about the direction you were going to take for your life?
Monster, because I'd done 87 talks that year already, so
Jesus.
I did 35 this week.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. She's growing.
But I did 87 that year by the time my brother had committed suicide. So I went, wait a sec. I sat back, and I don't think if the gym hadn't shut down, I'd probably still be there. That's the thing. And then my brother committed suicide. I'd still be there grinding out these sessions. I was a great trainer, and when I started, it was $60 an hour. I pushed mine out to $250 for the hour, booked out from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. My breaks were liquid as much as they could be, and then I'd go through and I'd literally, because I weighed everybody in to show them the body fat percent change in that week, and then measurements I'd only do once a month. As I did that, and not with the measurements, but put them on the scale, I'd chew into something, one bite, chew it, talk to them, and then walk out. And that was my way of just getting through those. So I call it slowing it down to speed it up. So you actually slow down, you think about what you want, then you move towards that direction. And it's like, at war, you're not just you hear bullets, so you just run out anywhere. You might hear bullets, you have a look, you see where they're coming from. We can take cover across here, and we're going to move from this point to this point. Related to that, being very conscious and aware of how precious your life is at that moment, because that's the direction of intention versus distraction. I can sit and say, all right, what do I want to get out of life at this point in time? That's 6 months. And, even now, there's things in your phone. You can make time out in your phone, even during the night. I make sure that I turn it off. I put it on flight mode. All that. So all these things, put it out in the lounge room. Being intentional. You can get into bed and scroll. So many people, even CEOs, tell me, I scroll and look at particular things, whether it's the stock market or something of that nature, right? business opportunity emails and so forth. I said, when's your downtime? And when was the last time you kicked a football or
Yep.
shot a netball here in Australia with your kid? And people in general say, oh, I try and do it every now and again. And I was like, well, when was the last time you can actually picture that? And some of them tell me like, oh, it's probably been a good year.
Yep.
And I'm like, a year since you've kicked a football. I wouldn't say it in that regard.
Yeah.
When would I just say it's more in my head? I'm saying that.
Wow, what are you doing, man?
What the F are you doing, right? But then I just come out and said, if you haven't done it in a year, when do you feel, based around your current schedule and how you think and programmed, will it ever happen? And, if you put them into a little round circle, they're the individual. You press a button, all the things come out and about their thoughts, behaviours, actions, beliefs. They're all geared towards one thing, the corporate CEO business side of things as an example.
Yep.
What do you think you're going to get out by the end of the year? You're functioning the same way. And if 90% of what was in that circle is how you operate tomorrow, I can guarantee you're going to move towards that. Possibly you might run past as you're going from your car to the office in your house to continue to visit. The ball bounces over, you kick it back to your kid and you keep walking. That's about it. And one of the things I learned as a young kid that I pass on to or those that watch this is I didn't feel the love from my parents, and it damaged me for a long time. I was like, stuff the parents. Years later, funnily enough, when I came back, my uncles and aunties had told me that they fought not to give me up. They'd actually given up my younger brother for adoption. I didn't even know that happened until Mum had leukemia. Seen the family tree and like, who the F's David? Did David pass on or something, stillborn? And all the aunties look at me and go, I'm not telling you. Mum will tell you. She has, you got another brother. We had to give him up. I couldn't afford him. So, they had nothing. They've really struggled. They didn't have the skill set.
Yeah.
This day and age gives you so much more opportunity, I suppose. Father came over from Austria to as an immigrant to make do and was a baker. Used to try and gamble to win money and get the big win and get us out of there. It was just all toxic, man. But you look back on it and you think that you're not loved. But what they were doing in his head around that gambling, he was thinking, I'm going to make do for my son. I love him. And same with my mum. She cooked as much as she could. She got a job as a cook so she could just get food on the table because she obviously wasn't as skilled. And it's just, my biggest advice to any person that watches this, make sure you give as much time, but let your kids know that what you're doing in a space is for them. Put some time aside to actually be for them. Because everything in any circle, as an example, you're teeing off, the little tees. I always use this analogy, like it's a tee, you put it into the ground, put the golf ball on top, Tiger Woods hits off. That tee is time, energy and effort. And if you don't give that to anybody on the other side of the coin in any relationship, they're going to feel that. Whether that's your business partner, whether it's your partner, your husband, your wife, your kids, they're going to feel that and they're going to say, mate, I don't want to be in this space anymore. And do that on a team and you sit on the bench every game, I can guarantee you. Don't put the time, energy, effort into your training, learning the moves within the team or something of that nature, how the structure is. I guarantee you sit on the bench and you don't want to be sitting on the bench of life for yourself.
Well, I guess it goes back to what you were saying before when you were saying you'd have a look at people's calendar and it can tell you what direction people are going in. And a lot of people, men that I work with it as well, they're like, I want to, I'm doing this for my kids or I'm doing this so I can have a year traveling around the world. I'm like, okay, well, show me a calendar. Have you scheduled 30 minutes a day with each child or not a day, but a week with each child? And they're like, no, I'm like, well, you're not going to have the opportunity to have that relationship because it's like daily deposits in any relationship. You're either withdrawing, and that means you're not putting time into it, or you're depositing, meaning you're doing little bits, even if it's 5 minutes, right? 1-to-1 or whatever that looks like. And people often overlook that. The same with a lot of guys who are like, I'm setting myself up. I'm going to travel the world in 10 years' time. I'm like, well, you're traveling now. And as you said, a lot of people, haven't traveled for 5 years.
Crazy.
How the fuck do you know if your systems in your business are going to support you to travel for a year if you don't take a month away now?
Absolutely.
And you got to learn to separate yourself and gain that feedback. So I thought that was interesting to tie that back into what you were...
That pivot on that, just really quickly, people got to understand when the gym shut down, brother commits suicide, relationship breakup, it made me pivot to a different direction. And that, even sometimes we think it's a bad thing, but I look back on it, what was the lessons that I learned from that? So I grew and prospered. And that's all I did. I went, fuck, I'm going in a totally pivot this direction.
Yep.
And I went all in, grabbed my balls, and like I always did when I went into a bank, and pulled the balaclava on and stepped into life. And all it takes is to, literally grab your balls and have a real crack at what you want within your life, but a structured crack where we think you can use up. You can say, I worked for 16 hours today, Locke.
Yep.
But 16 hours, did it get you to closer to the life that you truly want?
Yep.
And if that meant, do you want to spend 16 hours in an office all your life, never see what's outside those windows? And that's your title tells you that you're King Dingaling. Each to their own. If that's what lights your world up, don't bring a kid into the world and just go balls to the wall down that path. That's a conscious conversation you can have with yourself, but people don't. They'll bring one kid, 4 kids into the world, step into that space, 16 hours. You reckon your wife's happy at home, honestly? Yep. 16 hours, you come home buggered. I was so buggered, mate, when I used to pick up back at that point in time, like as a PT, 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Friday, 8 to 12 on a Saturday. I swear the first thing I was thinking, I hope she's got a comfy bed. I'm not I swear to, because once it's done, I can have a mad
roll
sleep,
over and have
right?
a snooze, yeah.
And then you get there and you're like, oh, wooden bed, why do you buy a cheap bed in my head? Like a twist, that's how twisted it is, right? So imagine if you're doing that to yourself in life, you're showing up going, you want more. You just want a different way of life. You think it's great to sleep with a person, but realistically, you're so burnt by the rest of your life that the proportion of your life towards what you say is the ultimate way of life damages you more than it actually lights you up. And just have a look at it. What percentage of it is actually lighting you up where it is balanced and there is some time for yourself, kids, partner, life, travel, driving whatever you want to drive, experiences, diving with shark. I don't know what it is, jumping out of airplanes, go and do it. Make sure it's in your schedule. And I look at people, I ask them, show me your schedule. It's the first thing I ask them, and as soon as they tell me I want X, Y, and Z, I get them to write that ideal life out. Where is it in your schedule? Gives a look. And they're just like, what now? And I was like, right now. And I said, bro, you got 4 hours here, 6 hours there. You tell me you don't have time. You got time. You just, is it a laziness thing for yourself? What do you feel that it is for yourself? And when I say that, I obviously don't say it in that regard, but it's more that I point them in a direction. What hasn't happened in your life that could happen based around what you've told me you would like to happen. But to me, it's in the background. I'm thinking, this is a laziness thing. I'm someone who can have that conversation. A lot of them know my background, so I'll just say, bro, you don't want to get got in jail. If you walk into jail and you just walk in like a pussy, you're going to get got. Period. People come up and say, yeah, give us this, mate. As soon as you buy your buy-up, which is the food you get every week, you get $60 worth of food if you're lucky. Because you've worked. Some people don't get that amount. They get $40. And people will walk up and just say, give us that.
Is that like your breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Is that just snacks and
snacks and that? You get noodles, you get some meat sometimes. If you're lucky and you save up, or people put money in your account, you get a Breville TV stuff. Some people go through their whole sentence, no TV, people bouncing them for their foods. And even if they get a TV, people take their TV and say, shut up, you say anything, I'm going to do something. And this is where, as men, the boy becomes a warrior, or they stay as a little boy. And I think 18 years of jail made me grow up really quickly.
Was it violent in there?
Very violent. Yeah. Every day is battle mode. As soon as the door opens, better be prepped. And it's one of the reasons I trained my ass off. Boxing, everything, running, kicking, anything you couldn't do, I'd do it and be prepped for war, man. And that's the way you should go into life. Life is war.
But how do you feel that frames your mindset coming out? Obviously, coming from such or conditioned for 18 years essentially to be violent, right? It is war, and obviously when you say war, it's do or die, but not in necessarily the physical context in the streets where you probably go straight back in. Yeah. But how was it for you transitioning out, like coming back after 18 odd years in prison to then transitioning back into the civilian world?
It's more like probably just keeping your ego in check, to be honest. So if someone says, mate, what are you doing? You cut me off and say, get out of the car. I'll give you a left hook.
Yeah.
Firstly, I thought about if I give him the left hook in my head, not that I was like that anyway, I'll go back to jail.
Yep.
Is that where you want to go? So I'd had that conversation in jail. So, you know, I had kids that say, get out, mate, I'll smash you. And I don't even know what this bloke's talking about.
Yeah.
Whatever. And I wouldn't worry about it. And that, I think that process went on in jail because there was people that would say stuff like, but I was able to say it back in a way that I was still strong and staunch for myself, but I didn't have to fight.
Avoided conflict.
Yeah, whereas I didn't care about the conflict in the past,
Yep.
I started to just say, hey, let's see if I can manage this in a different way. And we found a common ground, and we were both happy at the end of it. And like there was race wars when I was there, you
Yep.
know, and being with the Aboriginal crew within there, you'd have Islanders,
So there's
Lebanese.
little crews in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't talk to them.
Yep.
One of the things I did was the total opposite. I went and talked to everyone, and they're like, "You are fucking nuts," and because, but I could walk over and it could all, you know, they just all attack me, and that would have been it.
Yep.
You could be the best fighter, it wouldn't matter. One in the wrong place, and
Yep.
many people had gone down in that process. But I had the belief that I could talk to people and communicate effectively, and that became huge towards these CEOs, these organisations, these communities, to make, you know, Aboriginal community. I walk in, I say, I want to talk about the health issues, but I want to ask you a few questions. Put your hand up if anyone likes their family being buried early. Put your hand up if anyone likes their family being locked up and it's a badge of honour. And we go through it. Put your hand up if you like suicide in the community. And I said, so now we've defined that, and that allows us to see something because they won't see that otherwise.
Yep.
Now we can have a conversation. And that's all I did in there. I did the same thing. So by the time I got to that lock and someone says, get out of your car, mate, I'll be like, not my business. You're literally like, I know what I could do. I'm cool with who I am.
It's quite a unique skill you have, though, being able to help people think about the consequences of what could be and then work it back and see how the actions actually influence that.
Huge. Reverse engineering, as you know, like for me, that was huge. I say, what would be the end outcome in this situation? So in jail, it was like, imagine if we could all walk around and help one another, train together, not stress with. So every unit I went to, and even when I was in Loddon, which was the last jail I was in, I got called to the governor's office, and you got the attitude, stuff the governor, I'm not going up there, I don't even want to talk to them, what do they want? Yeah, and then he said, mate, he wants to see, he said, I have to tell you that I'm very impressed. I've never seen the jail this quiet, and everyone's getting on with one another and so forth. And it was because I just got everyone to see that we were better off getting on with one another. And I said, to them, I'd say, did you bash the copper that arrested you? And he said, no. I said, why not, brother? I said, you want to be tough with me, but you didn't bash the bloke that arrested you. I don't get it. And what about the officers then? Well, let's run a riot and we'll smash the joint up. Like, this is how you would talk to them. And they'd sit there and the light bulb moment would go off and say, bro, I'm on your team and you want to fight me? We're on the same team, brother. So we got that little conversation going, and there'd be more context and depth to that. But that's just the gist of teaching myself effective communication, helping a billion-dollar organisation, seeing that burning their staff out was less productive than actually pushing them to the absolute limit. So they got that deal done, scale it back a bit. Now we've got 10 of those deals done. Wow, I didn't think like that. Put these pods into your work, give them 20 minutes where they can go and just chill out, no phone in the pod, stuff of that nature. And people are like, we don't have the time to do it, and see what happens. Trial it, and sure enough, things would happen. And out of that process, they say, mate, I'm very happy with where we went. We never thought about it. We're too busy. We're just driven towards an outcome. And it's like anything. No Formula One car goes out on the track, drives the whole race on the same tyres. Has to come in. They'd love to stay out and stay ahead, but if they stayed out, they'd actually slow down rather than speed up. And that's an analogy that I'd pass on to anybody that watches this. Give your staff the break. And I think now the last couple of years, COVID taught people that there is the potential for people that work from home to be happier in one sense, where they got to see their family, kids, dogs, whatever it may have been, get out during the middle of the day, do a walk near their home, and then get back home. But now how do we master being able to still connect with people? And if some organisations got them back into work and they were able to interact on a Monday and Friday, 3 days at home during the middle of the week, and they've got a sort of healthy balance in between.
With all the effective communication stuff that you obviously were practicing in prison, probably one of the hardest places to implement it. You mess up there, you get your head punched in, as opposed to just getting someone saying no.
Yeah.
Was there a pivotal moment in prison for you that made you pick up books, or like even prior to prison, were you introduced to personal development, or where did it sort of pop up in your life?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good question. Like, it's I think it was like I was so intrigued by Arnie and all that. The abs. 18 years old when I first went to jail. Even prior to jail, men's health and or fitness. Funny story. I was about to get a big 6-page spread on men's health, and they literally said, "Mate, we've gone bust." Just
really?
the other day. So.
When was that? Yesterday, did you say?
No, that was just recent.
Oh, yeah, right.
And, so I was like, I always wanted to be. And I never went down the path of it. Even when I was a trainer, I wasn't fussed by it. I was like, I don't care. But they came to me, we'll do a 6-page spread on the story and we'll talk about it. And I was like, yeah, awesome. And the week they went to interview me, they said, mate, we've gone bust. And
they're done.
Yeah, they're done. So
see you later.
You won't see them. I don't know how many issues they've still got. I don't even know if that's public knowledge, but anyway.
Yeah, we should.
Sorry, men's health, but it was more that you get those in there, magazines and car magazines or fitness magazines. So I just read about the human body. I train Arnie, like other people, back then, and I'd just go, mate, I'd love to be like that, and I think that yearn for knowledge went out to that, and then I started to read other things around business. So people would come through, and I'd talk to people. I'd talk to everyone. And those that had misappropriated funds, never been in trouble before, I'd get as much knowledge as I possibly could from them. And they'd tell me different things I'd never knew about, how to invest your money and so forth. And I was like, oh, wow, so I could get that money and start to do X. And that's how I sort of basically started to transition into, understanding business, acquiring knowledge, and then the yearn for books. So I just got books constantly and read.
There's so much power in books. In your interview with Cooper, you were mentioning how obviously you were stealing cash from off the teller's bench, and you had this epiphany later on that it's like that could have been someone's last X amount of dollars that they were going to do something important in their life with, and you were pinching it. There's a lot of youth crime, especially in Brisbane. I don't know what it's like down in Sydney, but I'd imagine it'd be similar.
Yeah, definitely.
And you were obviously doing stuff when you were younger. Why do you feel that's happening, and do you feel like the system's set up to help these people change? Because I see a lot of stuff on the page. It's like car stole, and they're on TikTok. Some run into a car accident, killed someone. It's fucking running rampant, mate. There was where I grew up. There was like 1,000 people protesting for like trying to get things sorted, because obviously the police.
Is that north side?
I know. So where I grew up in Toowoomba, a regional town was going nuts. Yeah, and no one really knows what to do. So obviously having been on that side, but then also the work you're doing now, where you are turning people's lives around. What do you feel? Well, one, is there a solution? What do you feel we need to do as a community to get people back on track?
That. Like, a lot of people would say get the kids and divert the action. Yeah, that's cool, right? I did something with ACT Health around healthy lunchboxes to explain this analogy. And they said, healthy lunchboxes for Aboriginal kids. I said, healthy lunchboxes, do you know how much that costs? What's your vision of a healthy lunchbox?
Yeah.
Bang, we put it together. How much does that cost? Times 5. I said, do you know what the average income is? And we went through that process, and I said, shit. I said, if you put the breakfast on for kids, but they have to exercise before the breakfast, so that you kill 2 birds with one stone, and you'll get the attendance. Now you got an extra layer on top of that. Now the focus has gone up, an extra layer, and it was powerful. What we focus on is the kid. Stop doing that crime. The kid's wired because their parents probably douchebags, or they don't role model the kids into a space where they know how to act, behave, or have morals, values, beliefs, respect for the community. And that's, to me, I went into it more survival, went on the streets, and by then found the money in the red frogs, and finding money in red frogs to running up, snatching money off counters, and then getting to a point, say, hey, I'm actually going to jump this counter. What do you reckon? Yeah, let's do it, and go from that process to that process. Is one where it was, mine personally started as survival, and then I was just wired as a person to, these days, probably the relatable thing to people to understand is when they can't cook, let's all hit Uber Eats, easy money. So my way of going to make money was just down a destructive path. But if you can go back to the parents and role model the parents, I think that's a community thing.
Yes.
And get everybody involved without judgment and saying you should do better for your kids. They will pass on the same knowledge from their parents as well. Sit down with them, just have convos, because that's how in the prison yard I'd sit with the person who was a accountant or whatever it may be, Alan Bond, and have conversations around money. And it was taught me, oh, here's different. Wow, I never thought about money in that regard. I just got it and spent it. What if I got it and invested it and it brought me in 10 times what I just dropped on it? Now I've got a different thought process around that space. And you'll never get a different thought process around a kid unless it starts in the family home, because that's where they go back to. And if it's not the family home, whoever they're being cared for has value.
It's a good point, because a lot of people want to, they always go, I'm going global with whatever the impact that you want to have is. And it's like, well, how about you just start with the people directly influenced by you, the ones that you do see on a regular basis, and ripple effect from that.
Give another one like DV. When we look at DV, and I don't support it, I don't justify it, I don't condone it. But what we do when, I go out and we're together, I hit my partner, Jeff, you're a douchebag, and all of the names that go with it. But what we've got to do is we've got to think about is now let's isolate Jeff. I'm not going to hang around him. I go isolated, we vilify him. And all of a sudden, I'm a dead cell within the community. She's left me, but now I move on to the next partner. I've still got the same habits. Get cheeky to me, bang again. And now this time it wasn't as lucky as the last time. And when I say lucky, not even lucky, this person hasn't made it through. But if we sit down and have that conversation that our mate needs to hear, Jeff, where did you get that behaviour from? It's unacceptable, brother. I consider you a friend, and I didn't know that you were built or wired like that. How could I help you make a better choice at the next decision? What would that decision be? And have a real man conversation, a courageous one, and not judge the person in the sense it's not good what they've done, and they might just think that's how you handle your shit. You ask them, they'll tell you that's how you handle your shit. My dad done it. Mum never said shit. That would be their answer. Trust me, I grew up in a community of it. So to sit down with the person and say, what would be a better option next time? Let's draw a line in the sand right here, step across into this space, and next time when you go to do it, what you're going to do is walk out of the house, call me, call Bill Bloggs, and we're going to have a conversation with you. We'll walk, even if it's 3 a.m., we'll walk the block, and what it may do, one night you gave up to walk a block at 3 a.m., it flips the mindset of a person
Changes
to act
life.
better. And they step into the next relationship, and now you see maybe even the person, the females, being destructive, toxic, and he's got such boundaries. He says, look, I don't want to be in this anymore, and he walks away without being violent to the other person. What would that be worth to everybody on this planet? Because you got to think the person next door is your neighbour, and that's our community. How can we make our community better? Because we are our, not just singular. And when we think on that level, then we can create real positive change.
And it's tough to do that, because I'm sitting here thinking, why on earth would people not call their mate out for that behaviour? And for most of us, we're projecting, oh, that's embarrassing for me because I'm hanging out with this person and it's our own shit.
Absolutely.
But as you've sort of said, we need to step up to sort of get them back on track and challenge the way that they're thinking or how they're behaving in order to get a desired outcome, whatever that outcome is for the individual.
You don't have to hang around them still if that's what your choice is, and that's cool because you've got a boundary around that. And that's cool as well. But you can have a conversation before you cut ties. Say, brother, I want to be honest with you. I find that unacceptable. But what I do want to do is sit down with you, even for a couple of weeks, and talk about this. How can you make a better decision? Because if you don't, the next person might not be so lucky, and you might end up in jail for 20 years, mate. And you know what? I actually valued you at one point until you show me otherwise. And maybe they do. They end up with another partner. They're treating them well. And, through somebody else, you hear that they're doing well and their partner respects them and there's no violence within that. And it's, because of your conversation, the strong one, has shifted that person into a different direction.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's generational change. You become, the person who drew the line in the sand, and you weren't even a part of the family technically.
And that for everyone listening who, you know, there's always people going, I have people reach out, how can I get involved in what you're doing and help you? I'm like, well, just start being a better leader in your own environment. You don't need to have a
100%.
podcast. You don't need to run workshops. Literally just call your mates on their poor behavior. If you believe it's poor behavior, or, you know, I just had Chris Feather from 98 Gym on the podcast, and I hope I don't butcher this, but one of the phrases I heard him say was, "We're not an exclusive gym.
Yep.
We're just we're so inclusive to the point that we hold people to a higher standard."
Love
and
it.
it's meaning, or the way I interpreted it was, I only want to include people in my circle who have the same standards as me. Meaning, this is how I view the world. This is why I value fitness. This is how I talk about
Love
money, relationships. And for me, I've been like, that's a brilliant takeaway for how we can build our environments and
Love that.
raise people to a whole new standard. Because you look at me 10 years ago, I was a pig.
Yeah.
And
I was
not
right next
proud
to you. man.
not proud of who I was, but my wife gave me a second chance. She kicked me out of a car in Thailand because I was
Wow.
not a good bloke, but she gave me second chance, and I've turned my life completely around. So I'm a big believer that people do deserve second chances. They need to allow their actions to start changing that. Now, I do want to value everyone's time. We've got James. We've got it first time ever. We're in Sydney here. Got a bloody producer on. This is the next level. I feel like
Love
Joe
it.
Rogan, man. And obviously your time as well, Jeff. But mate, just quickly to wrap up, what's the direction you're going, mate? Like, you're one of the most active people I follow on social media. You got a very strong message.
Thanks, brother.
What's the direction for you and the impact that you're looking to have?
Yeah, just to leave as much knowledge. One of the things as Aboriginal people, people might think this differently, but for us, knowledge is power.
Yep.
And how much is it worth? For me to compress years and years of time into a space and say, here's a gift to your lock,
Yep.
that allows you to get an outcome in a shorter period of time, that's the legacy I want to leave behind. Leave the knowledge that I've learned through those lessons to
Yep.
grow and prosper into a better space. And that, like you said, if it's the corporations are where huge money is around health and well-being and
Yep.
all of that, right? But if I can impact just someone walking down the street, then I'm going to do it. If I can impact a homeless person to get into a place where they feel valued, start working, see a different way to life, I'm happy to be in that space too. The biggest thing for us as a global business, mental health and well-being, leadership, resilience, high performance habits and rituals, these things can be delivered anywhere, to a school kid through to a soldier, which we've done. And I think that's the biggest thing. I'm happy to leave knowledge, and hence why these podcasts are powerful, because it puts you in front of people that can maybe see things a different way. But to see things a different way, I just want to touch on what you said before. And even when you said it, you looked away because you sort of almost feel disgust in your old self. You just got to own that. And I've seen your podcast before. You've spoken about this. Be vulnerable. Let it go. Because once you're vulnerable, no one can say shit about you.
Exactly, yeah.
You can say all you want about chapter 5 of my life, being a bank robber and all of that.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. Talk about chapter 55, where I put the cape on and the villain become the hero, and I flew off into the world delivering that knowledge every place I land into. And that's how I sort of view the direction of our business, just to be able to help people. And that could just change or save a life. And if that means it's not your brother or sister that commits suicide, or that means that you step into your goals, dreams, aspiration, that means that you step up and grab your balls to your vision, purpose and why, and step into life for the rest of your life to be the best of your life, then it's going to be a good one.
Yeah, ripper. Mate, that was
Love it.
awesome. But yeah, I hope everyone takes away from this. For me especially, I always talk about the importance of surrounding yourself with, it's that cliche saying,
Huge.
some of the 5 people you spend the most time around with, that really impacts your life. But you're also the perfect example of coming from somewhere that didn't have access to that environment. You also went into a place that's probably going to pull you the complete opposite way. In prison, you're hanging around a lot of
Huge.
people who aren't
Crabs in the
necessarily
bucket.
looking to get out there and strive for greatness. So you've been held back in that front, and you've turned your life around. And you're living proof that it's possible, mate. So
Love
for
it.
anyone who's telling them those excuses that you can't make things happen, we'll listen to this episode again.
Hold yourself to the high standard. And the owner of 98 Gym, I know their gym, and they've done really well. Do that same standard within your circle. and watch what happens. People will drop off and it's cool, and I don't judge those people because maybe they want a bender, maybe they want a different way of life, maybe they want whatever it may be. But what I hold myself to now, I'm happy to be in that space, and those that are on that same level, heading towards the same direction of intention around their truest, authentic self, that's who I'll be around in that space. And the only outcome out of that's going to be magical, man. The life that you dreamt of when that cell door locked every single night.
Epic. So, guys, thank you for tuning into this episode. Whatever channel you're listening to on it, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss another episode. All the links below. You can find Jeff's work. You can find our academy and all of that sort of stuff. And also special thanks to James, our producer today. First time, mate. It's a magical moment.
Big love.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for tuning in.